Hi, this is John Hall of Orleans. You're tuned in to On the Flip Side with Java John on Public Radio WFIT.
I wonder if you might take a little time to discuss No Nukes with me this evening.
I'd love to. 32 years after the first No Nukes concerts at Madison Square Garden, I guess I didn't think we were going to have to come back and do this again. But the continuing mistakes and misjudgments by the energy industry and by the governments around the world brought us to the point where we've got 3 total meltdowns and 1/2 meltdown of reactors in Fukushima, Japan. And still, the United States official energy policy calls for more nuclear plants to be built. And we are calling for none of them to be built and for a swift transition to solar, wind, geothermal, small hydro projects, biofuels, and all the other kinds of renewables, which are affordable, available, and ready to go today if we would just invest in them.
Well, you know, myself, like many of other folks in 1980, became aware of the dangers of nuclear power through the concert film and the album and the publicity of the No Nukes concert series. Can you give us a little bit of history on how the Musicians United for Safe Energy came about, John?
Sure. I got involved in the issue of nuclear power because the New York State Power Authority was trying to build a nuclear plant 6 miles north of where I lived at the time in the Hudson Valley. And I went to the hearings with the NRC and the Public Service Commission and just got the impression that they weren't listening, that the commissioners were staring off into space and twiddling their pencils while people got up, one man and woman after the other and said, we don't want this nuclear plant next to us. We don't think there's a solution to the nuclear waste, which is highly radioactive for hundreds of thousands of years. We don't think that we should put a terrorist target in our midst, although back then we certainly didn't know how likely that might be.
Right.
We don't think that there should be trains or barges or trucks on our roads carrying spent fuel or highly enriched or low enriched fuel. Just we don't want the radon gas from the uranium mill tailings. We don't want the whole thing. Just let's look at solar and wind and hydro and geothermal instead, and conservation, of course. And it worked. The Muse concerts, the 79 Muse concerts in the film that came out in 1980, and the CD and the album and so on, they worked in cohort with the consciousness about 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and the environmental movement in general to prevent any new nukes for 30 years from being built in this country. So we really were successful. But the nuclear industry tried to paint itself as green. It is trying today to paint itself as green because people are worried about, and they should be worried about, carbon emissions causing global warming and radical extreme weather and climate events, which have been happening. But presenting that as a choice is a false choice. The choice is not between fossil fuels on one hand and nuclear on the other. It's between old, dirty technologies on one hand and new, clean, non-polluting technologies on the other.
Right.
And just last week there was an article I read in the paper about a new solar plant in Spain that's a different version from, it's not photovoltaic, it doesn't convert electrons, or the sun's rays directly into moving electrons. What it does is it heats up a field of metal, flat metal pieces that are welded together and painted black in a slightly conical circle so that the air flows toward the center where there's a big tube that goes a couple hundred feet up into the air. Well, the thermal that's created in Spain at this solar power plant rises up the tube, and there's a turbine in the tube that spins as a result and turns a generator that puts power into the grid. It's creating an updraft and using the sun to do it. It's just one of the many, many really creative new ways of generating power that are being developed all around us. And there are fields of ocean buoys that use wave action to produce power that's been tested off the coast of California. There is a tidal power six-pack, they call it, of turbines, 6 tide turbines in the East River, east of Roosevelt Island, that have been used to as a pilot project to prove that the changing currents in the East River, which are like clockwork, 50 years into the future, you can predict when the tide will change, and that's enough to power thousands of homes, just a little pilot project. All these things need to be invested in, but what we've done so far, and unfortunately what our new House of Representatives is doing this year in Congress, is cutting all investments and cutting all subsidies and loan guarantees for all alternatives in renewable energy. And the only ones they're leaving in are for oil and for nuclear.
Right.
And we've been subsidizing nuclear for 60 years. If it can't stand on its own 2 feet by now, then just economically it doesn't make sense.
Right.
And oil, don't get me started.
I hear you.
ExxonMobil last year had the biggest profit in corporate history of any corporation and paid 0 corporate tax in the United States. So they think they need our help.
Crazy.
You know, if we have a deficit problem and a debt problem, we shouldn't be using taxpayer dollars to keep Exxon even wealthier than they already are, especially when they're gouging us at the pump. So this is about energy independence, not just from the Saudis or Venezuela or the oil states, you know, from OPEC. It's about independence from the corporations who are not only gouging us financially, but are hurting our health and are, in fact, killing our children.
Sure. Man.
The reason I say, some people might say that's a little severe. Don't you think that's a little strong to say killing our children? Well, I would refer them to an article called the Petkau Effect. You can search online for PETKAU effect. Dr. Petkau at UC Berkeley did this study that shows that low levels of radiation, which we've always been told are safe,
right,
like below the EPA limits that are allowable levels of radiation, you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
Oh, don't worry, it's no more than getting a chest X-ray, that kind of thing.
Right.
Well, in fact, low levels of radiation are more deadly if they're a prolonged period of time. They're more deadly than a short exposure to a high level of radiation. And it's explained very well in that article. And there's also an article on, I was just reading on Huffington Post, that I believe Carl Gross is the reporter from 2010, last year. And this article tells the story of the increasing cancer epidemic. In the year 1900, at the turn of the last century, cancer was the 8th leading cause of death. And in 2010, it passed heart disease to become the number 1 cause of death. And so why is that? And the article explores it at great length. But one of the reasons is that the industries involved have an unbelievable amount of money. They spend that money through lobbyists and lawyers and advertising and convince us that they're all nice and soft and fuzzy and we shouldn't regulate them. You know those commercials on TV from the people of the oil and natural gas industry.
Oh, yeah.
You know, where you see a woman talking and there's a kid on the floor and there's
sure.
an African-American guy and he's like, is the kid drilling for oil? I'm not sure, but behind that is the billions of dollars they have lying around to pressure governments, including the International Atomic Energy Agency and the World Health Organization, to not draw attention to the fact that nuclear waste, nuclear accidents, radiation in our environment, along with the many chemicals in the environment, are increasing the cancer rate, are killing people, and they're doing it for profit. And that's not justifiable.
Right. Unbelievable.
It is. It's worse than I thought it was.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, that's what activists are for.
Exactly.
And sometimes that's what music is for.
After the Fukushima disaster, and then last month after hearing of the threats to Palo Verde and Fort Calhoun, I was going to email you and suggest raising awareness again through reviving the No Nukes. And later that afternoon, my Rolling Stone magazine came in the mailbox, and I opened it up, and there was a picture of Jackson Browne with the caption, "Brown Nash Revive No Nukes Concerts." So I was just tickled to see that. And you know, just delighted to know that everybody is back on board and that nobody has dropped the ball on this, that everybody is still fighting.
Well, I suppose we might have dropped the ball over the last 30 years a little bit, because we all have, families.
Right.
We all have careers. We all have our own business to take care of.
Right.
And we kind of thought that, especially after Chernobyl, we thought that people would go, okay, this is really too dangerous to fool around with. Let's do the sensible thing, which, by the way, China is doing. China, which many Americans would tell you is our main rival in the world economically, has bought more than half of the installed wind power in the world. So they must think that wind is a good idea.
Sure.
Germany and Spain and Portugal and Israel and all these other countries, India, are investing heavily in solar and wind and other alternatives, and we're falling behind again. The photovoltaic cell, solar electric power, was designed and built originally by NASA to power our satellites, and paid for by us. You and I and every American paid through our taxes to design and invent photovoltaic panels.
Right.
Why should we go from buying oil from the Saudis to buying photovoltaics from China? That's totally nuts.
Yes.
We should be the innovators. We should be the ones out in front with the best, the cleanest, the healthiest, not just curing cancer, but preventing cancer along the way. And we should be selling these technologies, selling wind turbines, selling solar cells around the world rather than buying them from other countries the same way we buy, tube socks at Walmart. It's time to get out of the tube sock mentality and
exactly.
And start being creative, and it's time for our government to, step up and regulate these industries and more importantly, stop subsidizing the dirty ones.
Yes.
Our new song, I Told You So, which you can get to by going to johnhallmusic.com, and then clicking on the bottom right there, you'll see a little orange graphic that says I Told You So, with some reactor cooling towers in the background. You click on that, it'll take you to a special website that's made just for this song. It has the lyrics on it with an explanation sidebar. If you click on the highlighted lyrics, it tells about what some of the references are in the lyric, and credits, liner notes, that sort of thing. And there's also a really good music video that you can click on over to YouTube from the site and see it there.
Yes.
So, my wife Melanie told me the last time around in 1978 when I first wrote Power, she said, it was a nice kumbaya,
right,
kind of folky song. Just give me the warm power of the sun, and it actually said, "Please take all your atomic poison power away." This time we're not saying please; we're saying "I told you so."
Right on.
And here's what happened,
Yeah.
And it goes back to Browns Ferry, to Davis-Besse, to 3 Mile Island, to Chernobyl, and now to Fukushima. And there's a lot of, it shows the rabbit with no ears. That's
right.
The mutant rabbit that's on a farm right outside of Fukushima, and it shows the ghost towns in Ukraine, where there are whole cities and factories and apartment buildings abandoned because it's so radioactive that no human being will be able to live there for a long time.
Yep.
And the Japanese have the same problem now, where they call it a nuclear sacrifice zone.
Right.
I don't want that in my community.
No.
And I don't want it in your community. I don't want us to surrender more and more parts of the earth because they became too radioactive to live on. So, so I Told You So is there at johnhallmusic.com. And also, of course, we'll be singing Power at the concert on Sunday. And the proceeds from the concert, by the way, as well as proceeds from the streaming video on stageit.com.
Right.
And part of the proceeds from the iTunes download or the Amazon download of our song, I Told You So, will go to, half of the money is going to go to benefit the relief efforts in Japan that are still ongoing for people who've been displaced by the tsunami and the nuclear unfolding disaster there. And the rest of it is going to go to promote renewable energy projects here and education about energy, safe energy here in the United States.
Excellent. So the Muse No Nukes concert will be held at the famed Shoreline Amphitheater in Mountain View, California.
Mm-hmm.
And along with yourself, there's Crosby, Stills, and Nash. You mentioned Jackson Browne, Bonnie Raitt. Jason Mraz is going to be on board. The Doobie Brothers are coming back. Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine. And Kitaro. Very interesting to see him in there. Excellent.
Sweet Honey in the Rock.
Sweet Honey in the Rock is back. And Jonathan Wilson. Are there any other names that have been added?
I just got a call a couple days ago from Guy Davis.
Oh.
Asking if he could sit in with me, and I'm happy to say he's going to bring his harmonica, and he'll be joining us for a tune.
Nice.
I don't know. I think there are others that I'm not remembering, but it's a sort of expanding concert because once people hear about it, they ask if they can join us. And this time around, it's different with 32 years having passed.
Right.
And back then there was no internet. There was no
right.
There was no Facebook. There was no Twitter. So more people this year will see one afternoon and night
yes.
of a Muse concert for No Nukes on their computer or on their TV at home if they're wired up to watch it on their TV. More people will see it by streaming video than fit in the, I think it's 12,000 capacity at the amphitheater. And way more people than that are going to watch it online. So it's
excellent.
Kind of an interesting thing that we don't have to do 5 nights anymore.
Right.
We do one night, and then potentially millions of people can be there.
Well, and I'm sure that during the performances there'll be information provided to people.
Well, what we did in the 70s, since 1979 at the Madison Square Garden shows, was we kept the concert a concert.
Right.
For the most part. We really didn't want to stand on stage and lecture people.
Right.
We do that sometimes in rallies or like when I'm talking to you right now, for instance.
Right.
But the concert is going to be music.
Okay.
Maybe an occasional remark, an occasional song like Power
sure.
or I Told You So. But mostly it's going to be playing and singing. People know why they're there. They know why we're there.
Right.
But the program book in 1979 had all the information in it. So if you bought your ticket, you came to the concert at the Garden, you got a program to take home with you that had lots of information about nuclear power.
Nice.
And about nuclear waste and about the dangers of different kinds of accidents or low-level radiation not really being safe for you and so on. And this time around, there are going to be similar opportunities, I think, during the intermissions when the set changes are going on and people in the amphitheater are going to get a hot dog or whatever they're doing. And my guess is there will probably be some interviews and informational moments there.
Good.
You can also, if your audience or you are curious, you can go to my website, johnhomemusic.com, and click on I Told You So, and it takes you to the site for the song, which has lots of information in there about the issue.
Good.
And about how I got involved in it, about how the song was written and why, and what the problems are and what the solutions are. And then there are links to go to Musicians United for Safe Energy with number 4, United number 4 safeenergy.org, or nukefree.org, or there's NIRS, which stands for the Nuclear Information Resource Service.org, which is a very good organization based in D.C. that provides information you won't see on cable or network news, or that you won't read in your local newspaper, because really there's been a blackout going on. When you think about it, March 11th, the tsunami happened, and the reactors started to melt down in Fukushima. It took another week or two before the utility, TEPCO, and the Japanese government started being honest
right.
with their own people about how bad it was. And then a month after that, we started seeing spikes in radiation in the United States. There's radioactive rain in Vermont, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania that's been measured. 66% of the EPA's, quote, allowable limit of cesium-137, which is a gamma-emitting radioisotope with a half-life of 30 years. Very dangerous stuff. We now have, in Japan, beef that's being pulled off the shelves because it's contaminated in Tokyo. Not in Fukushima, in Tokyo, because it was fed with grain or hay that came from the
right.
contaminated farms in the northeast part of the country. There are green tea and other teas that have been pulled for export and banned from export from Japan because of the contamination. There are children in Tokyo, much farther from Fukushima than Manhattan is from Indian Point, by the way, and these children have shown in tests to have measurable amounts of radioactive substances in their urine. It's really it's caused a disruption economically because Japan has traditionally it's grown most of its own food and is now looking to import food,
right?
Especially meat, and because at the top of the food chain, these toxins get concentrated more. It's complicated things like automobile production. Toyota and other companies have had to slow down production because some of their parts manufacturing took place in factories in the contaminated area, or the workers have been evacuated and can't get to their job, or the supply chain is disrupted. So it went from being initially a problem along the coast where the tsunami hit, and especially a problem when you're near the reactors,
right,
to being a problem that affects the entire country of Japan and the economy of Japan. And they're having rolling brownouts and mandatory conservation in other cities like Tokyo because they were so dependent on nuclear power, and right now I think more than half of their nuclear plants are turned off, especially all the GE plants that are the same design as Fukushima, until they can ascertain whether or not they are safe, and then until they can make the transition, which is going to take years, unfortunately. But their government has said officially, the Prime Minister said that their policy now will be to switch to renewable energy instead of building more nuclear plants. And I hope it doesn't take a similar meltdown here,
right,
with a similar loss of life and contamination of a wide area before we make that decision. And that's why Muse is performing this concert, and all the artists are getting together tomorrow, the 7th, in California. And that's why we wrote the song, I Told You So, and shot the video and all that, because sometimes music is the best way to communicate. And I guess I should probably stop talking and start singing at that cue. But I don't have my guitar plugged in.
It's a powerful motivator, it sometimes is, that's for sure.
Well, I remember when I heard Bob Dylan sing Blowing in the Wind, or other
Masters of War.
Bring the Boys Home by Freda Payne.
Yeah.
When I heard Marvin Gaye sing What's Going On, or Mercy, Mercy Me, The Ecology.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how prophetic was he?
Mm-hmm.
Marvin Gaye to sing, whoa, mercy, mercy me, all things aren't what they used to be. No radiation in the ground and in the sky. Animals and birds who live nearby are dying. And he sang about oil wasted on the oceans.
Mm-hmm.
And, all the stuff that we went from BP's oil spill last year to a meltdown that the Japanese government says they will not have under control, quote unquote, until the end of the year.
Mm.
What are we supposed to do? This thing is spewing radiation into the air and into the ocean, and the currents are carrying it along the west coast of Alaska and down the coast of Washington, Oregon, and California, and eventually it will circle the globe.
Right.
Just as the radiation from Chernobyl did in 1986, and just as the airborne radiation from Fukushima is doing right now. That's why we're getting radioactive rain in the northeast United States. So this cannot be allowed to multiply and spread, not just this accident, but future accidents in future plants. We need to change our focus, change our policy, stop subsidizing the industries that are killing us and making us sick, and start subsidizing or investing in the ones that will make us strong, that will keep us healthy, and that will provide energy with no fuel cost and no emissions. Imagine.
That show tomorrow from Shoreline Amphitheater in California, the No Nukes show, can be viewed on stageit.com, just like it sounds. It's stageit.com. Check it out. John, it's you're a wealth of knowledge. It is a pleasure chatting with you as always. I wanted to ask you, is there anything personal on your horizon that you might like to share with us at this point, or should we talk again in the future?
Well, I can tell you that I have more songs in the works. And
Yes.
Melanie and I are playing guitars and writing songs, and hope to have a full album-length project out soon.
Excellent.
Working with a little record company from New Hampshire. They happen to be 2 miles away from the Seabrook nuclear power plant, which is one of the reasons that Big Round Records has been, and Parma Recording has been so involved with this. They're the ones who put the website up that you can see.
I Told You So.
I Told You So on.
Yes.
And they are doing the digital distribution through iTunes and Amazon. And so, you know, there's exciting things going on artistically and musically. And meanwhile, I've lost 30 pounds since leaving office as a congressman. I've gotten to sleep in my own bed every night and spent a lot more time with Melanie and our dogs, and see my parents, who are 90 and 91. Thank God they're both still alive.
God bless them.
And gotten to visit them a whole lot more. And they're happy, and so am I about that. So
Wonderful.
So if we can just keep the world from going off the tracks here in the energy arena, so that more people will stay healthy, and more people will have jobs, and more people can afford to light their homes or drive their cars or power their computers or radios or whatever they're using power for, and not cause problems for the rest of us, then I think I'll be able to just move on to what I started out as, which is a musician. And, you know, my parents always told me when I was a kid, they said, you make sure you have something to fall back on. I don't think they realized it would be the guitar. But for me, you know, going from 4 years in the House of Representatives to back to the guitar is sort of like coming home again.
I hear you. Wonderful. I'm happy for you, John.
Thank you so much, John. I'm looking forward to a nice cup of Java with you.
I hear you. Me too. Thank you for taking the time with us tonight.
You're so welcome. Thanks for your help.
I want to mention one more song,
Sure.
and I don't know if you recall, but we had an interview 10 years ago, almost exactly 10 years ago, and I listened to it today, and it's probably the first time I listened to it since. I want you to tell us about the song "Power," and our interview that we had 10 years ago was about Fukushima.
Right.
And so I'd like to see your point of view on Fukushima today as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the song "Power" was written in the middle of the night. I wrote that chorus because I couldn't sleep. Johanna and our daughter Sophie were sleeping in Saugerties, New York, up near Woodstock, New York.
Mhm.
And I had gone that evening to a public hearing about a nuclear plant that was on the drawing board. It was supposed to be built 6 miles away from where we lived, and on the west bank of the Hudson River in New York. And it was obvious to me that the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, folks were not listening, and that the New York State Public Service Commissioner, the Power Authority of New York, were not listening, because everybody at the hearing was getting up and saying, "We don't want this. What are you going to do with the waste? What if there's a leak? You know, what if it's a terrorist target, et cetera?"
Yeah.
And they had already spent $150 million of taxpayer and ratepayer money to start building this thing, and to contract with the manufacturer, Babcock and Wilcox, for the exact same reactor that partially melted down at 3 Mile Island, Pennsylvania. I couldn't sleep, and I got up and tiptoed downstairs and sang that whole chorus. Give me the warm power of the sun. Give me the steady flow of the waterfall. Give me the restless power of the wind. It was all about renewable energy and eschewing nuclear. And then I could sleep after I wrote that chorus. So, and as far as Fukushima goes, you know, there have been a few cases of accidents that are bad enough that they have major impact over a broad area. and Chernobyl obviously was one. And there have been a couple others, Windscale in Great Britain.
Mm.
And Three Mile Island actually had more of an impact than the public has been told. But the one that's been most recent and most harmful, I think, is the meltdowns at Fukushima. They still don't know how to get all the radioactive water out other than dumping in the ocean.
Mm.
And the radioactive waste that'll be toxically radioactive for thousands of years is still a problem. That it's an engineering problem that has not yet been solved. So, of course, the utilities that were involved with that and the companies that built those reactors want to say, "Oh, it's over. We got it under control." But the fishermen in that area, or even on the west coast of the United States, Alaska, British Columbia, and the Northwest, are aware of the fact that that fish that they catch there, this fish that swim a long way, or the salmon that come in from the ocean and spawn in the rivers and so on, are carrying a higher level of radioactive isotopes than before Fukushima. And so it's something that I still believe is unnecessary and dangerous. But it's also too slow. There's a little discussion going on right now about whether nuclear could be the answer or the solution to climate change, because supposedly it's not carbon emitting. But in fact, when you mine the nuclear fuel, you mine the uranium, it's using these huge diesel earth movers. And when you barge it or truck it to the enrichment plant, it's diesel fuel being used. And then when it's being enriched, it's using electricity that comes from anywhere in the grid, which unfortunately is frequently still fossil fuels. And then when it's been enriched and the fuel rods get assembled and sent to the plants around the country, it's either barges using diesel fuel or trucks using diesel fuel, tugboats and so on. And but that's not really the most important reason, even why it's not a solution to climate change. You can't build a nuclear plant without an extensive siting procedure and for the safety of populated areas. And it takes, on average, 10 years or more to bring a nuclear plant from the drawing board to coming online. And we don't have 10 years. But what's available right now, without having to go through all those hearings and try to assure the populace that it's safe, what's available now is solar and wind and geothermal and hydropower and tidal power and wave power, all the alternatives that we could be using now that are basically, once you build a facility, they're free. The energy is coming from the sun or from the wind, and they already are cheaper than nuclear, cheaper than coal, cheaper than oil, cheaper than natural gas. You can't compete, actually. Just if you look at the economics alone, solar and wind are eating the lunch of all the fossil fuels in the marketplace. It's the fastest growing part of our energy mix, and we should put all of our investment there and all of our research there, and into batteries, so for electric cars, and into storage batteries or other storage systems for the power. So when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow, we'll be able to use that backup power. But it's all done very doable, and the engineering and the knowledge basically exists now. So so that would be my preference. End of speech.
What the hell are we waiting for? Yeah.
Since 1979, when power was written, what have we been waiting for? But especially now, what are we waiting for? Because everybody's starting to see that the effects of climate change are here. This is not something in the distant future.
Absolutely. And it looks pretty scary.
Yeah, it does. My granddaughter is the one I worry about.
Absolutely.
And, I worry about everybody, and I worry about everybody's kids and grandkids. But in my immediate family, that's it. So what kind of world will she be living in after I'm gone? And I want to make sure that it's as friendly as possible. Oh, I've just been great talking with you, John. Thanks for having me on, and
You have a great one. Thank you again.
bye.